thoughts and concepts like we do. And they don't preserve this knowledge and write it down for the next generation. The difference between the barks and grunts and groans and squeals of animals and language is a gigantic gap that cannot be bridged. Nobody has ever come up with a solution for how languages evolved. The simplest answer is God created Adam, fully formed. He could walk, talk, name the animals, and get married first day. It was a mature creation. And then the languages were confused at the Tower of Babel about 100 years or so after the flood, maybe 150 years, when everybody got confused into different languages. This was all done by the Lord. It had to just be miraculous as best I can figure out. But even still, all languages of the world have similar thought processes. They will have nouns to describe objects, and then they have adjectives. Noun to name the object, and adjective to describe it. Isn't it interesting that all languages have that same thinking process? You speak Russian, Ukrainian, and English. And if you think about it, your thought process in each one is similar. Now in Spanish, they put the adjective after the noun. See the tree, big, green, and beautiful? We would say, see the big, green, beautiful tree. They put the adjectives after the noun, but still, it's the same idea. You're describing a word with other words. And we can go on all day on languages. There's been many books written about this, how that languages simply could not have evolved. They had to be created. Chinese calendar says this is the year 4697. Now that's interesting. If the Earth is billions of years old, why doesn't some culture have an older calendar than that? Some have argued that the Egyptian calendar is older than that. They will say it goes back, I think, 5,500 years or something like that. The problem with the Egyptian calendar, these guys obviously liked their pharaoh, or they had to pretend they liked their pharaoh or lose their head. They built these massive temples to bury them in. They greatly exaggerated how long they were pharaoh. Plus, there were instances where you have several pharaohs at the same time, like they're having a civil war and the kingdom breaks up into feuding factions. But they all are counted as pharaoh, but yet they're all pharaoh at the same time. But when it ended up in the history book, they put them in chronological order. Well, this stretches the calendar out farther than it actually should be. It's very close to impossible to get accurate dates in secular history beyond about 1500 BC. It's very difficult even to look at the Exodus. The Exodus was about 1400 BC when Moses led the children of Israel out of Egypt. And people argue about the exact year, and I don't know, get into all those kind of discussions, but the fact is it's very difficult to get accurate secular histories before 1500 BC, 3,500 years ago. So there certainly is no proof from secular history or from written language that there's anything more than 4,400 years old, except some of these exaggerated calendars like the Egyptian calendar, which stretches things out. Civilizations, the first really world empire was Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. That's 600 BC. Don't you think if man had been here for 3 million years, somebody would try to set up an empire before that? Isn't that interesting that you have your first world empire in 600 BC with Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon? The books today, I tell my folks, I'm very concerned. They're no longer really books about science. They're actually books about evolution. It seems like somebody wants to use our school system to teach their philosophy to the next generation. I think I know why. We'll get into lots more of this later. But our founding fathers in this country had a slogan: life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Now, what on earth is that? Define that, please. Really, it's tough to put a picture to that. The real original slogan was life, liberty, and property. The ownership and control of your property. That's essential to freedom. But they said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Rights that you can't put a lien against. For instance, do you have the right to breathe? Where does this right come from? From God, right? Do you have to get a permit to do that? No. Do you have the right to get married? Who gives the authority to get married? God does. About 100 years ago, some people got tricked into getting state permission to do something God already said they could do. And there wasn't no such thing as a marriage license until about 100 years ago. And most people don't realize that a marriage license is a contract between you and your husband or wife and the state. You don't have to get a marriage license. Now, if you want to get one, they'll be glad to sell it to you. But you don't have to get one. But our founding fathers had a totally different philosophy. They thought that rights came from God, and they're unalienable. You can't put a lien against them. Now, if you get a bunch of folks together who believe that, they don't make good slaves. They're going to throw the tea in the harbor and rebel against King George, eventually. So, suppose you and a few hundred of your super rich gazillionaires decided you're going to have meetings a couple times a year and discuss how can we control the entire world. We would like to have us, the smart guys, be the rulers of the world, and everybody else be our rice farmers, our slaves. Now, in Egypt, when Joseph became the ruler of Egypt, what percentage of the profits did he take away from the people? Anybody remember? What was their tax in Egypt? 1/5. That's 20%. You know how much of your income goes to taxes in America today? 45 to 50%. The slaves in Egypt were better off than we are, weren't they? They only took 1/5. Throughout the Scriptures, you see that where 10% belongs to God and 10% or 20% max would go to the government. You got to have taxes for certain things. I understand all that, and I pay lots of taxes, okay? But we have gone crazy in this country because a super rich club of real smart guys have been meeting for years trying to develop a system of controlling the world's finances. And one of the key ingredients in getting a one-world government, which the Bible prophesies will come, one of the key ingredients is you have to get people believing there is no creator. They have to think rights come from the government. And probably most of us in this room, believe it or not, already have an awful lot of that philosophy built into us. When you go to get married, you think, oh, I got to go get a marriage license. Now, why do we think that? When a baby's born, you think, I got to get a birth certificate. Why would you think something like that?
It is important to recognize that the right to claim marriage on your tax form is granted by the government, and so a license is necessary for that. The right to claim your kids is government for the taxes. Now, you can argue the tax.
Understand, right.
But once you buy into the tax process, it's like you don't need a driver's license to drive a car, but you do on roads that are basically built by the government.
This opens up a whole can of worms of who gives authority to do what, and what are you going to buy into. If you want to use the Federal Reserve System's money, if you want to use their money and use their banks, see, that's not real money. This is paper, okay? So if you decide you want to use their system, then you have to buy into lots of things. If you want to get a loan at the bank, they may say, well, we require 2 years of tax returns. There's no law that says that. That's a bank policy. And the banks are an arm of the International Monetary Fund, and it all ties together in a very complex web called the Matrix. If you saw the movie The Matrix, that's what they're talking about, this complex web. And if you want to take the blue pill, you can just wake up in bed and just, go back to La La Land. But if you want to take the red pill and really understand it, we've got a video we've produced here called The Straw Man, which goes off into this topic and deals with lots of this, of how you can live just fine in this world without all their strings attached. I've been doing it for a long time.